Welcome to Things You Don't Know. This is the story of a brilliant, mentally ill emperor and the actress turned wife who kept him functioning and saved the eastern half of the Roman Empire. By the middle of the 6th century AD, the Western Roman Empire had ceased to exist for a whole century and a half. Western Europe had no secular universalizing authority anymore. Local monarchs, aristocrats, and warlords made bargains with the popes and traded tribute for legitimacy. This was not the case in the Eastern Empire.
The eastern half of the empire would last until the 15th century when it was overthrown by the Ottomans. In that country, power remained exclusively in the hands of the emperor and his favored bureaucrats. The officials of the Orthodox Church, which had not split from Rome in this period, were favorites among the elite. The appointment of spiritual figures, bishops, and patriarchs by politicians is called Caesaropapism. Thank you, my old mentor, Dr. Martin Siegel, for teaching me about that. See our World War I podcast to learn more about him. The idea of reunifying the other half of the Roman Empire goes on for centuries. Interestingly, the Roman Empire was split into an East and West Empire at the direction of Constantine in the 4th century, who said the empire was just too large to be run by one leader. This separation set up a situation in which the collapse of the unified authority in the West led to feudalism and a difficult period known as the Dark Ages. The East retained technological superiority, better relations with fellow monotheist Jews and Arabs alike, and a more significant presence in the world. Many Western rulers sought to replicate the prosperity they saw in the East and remembered from their own past. Justinian, although he was an Eastern emperor, felt it very important to unify the East and the West, to create what he called the bulwark of Christian civilization. This almost impossible task faced Justinian when he succeeded his uncle. In order to understand just what happened with this brilliant but often high-strung emperor, it's important to look at the life of his empress, who came out of the lowest level of society and accomplished what seemed to be impossible. Empress Theodora was a dancer and actress. These people were at the lowest level of society. Even prostitutes had greater social status, and she may have engaged in some relations as well. In 6th century Byzantium, another name for the Eastern Empire, sports rivalries determined political power. The so-called blue and green chariot race factions were rivals in the imperial court and in business. The fans of these clubs played a large role. There were a mixture of sports followers, dispensers of political patronage, and muscle for local officials. Theodora was born in April 490 in northern Syria, the daughter of a bear trainer for the Green Chariot faction. When she was 5, her father died, and her mother was left to starve, receiving no help. So in desperation, her mother married a cook who was a member of the Blue faction. This was considered heresy. It's the equivalent today of a passionate Redskins fan moving to Texas and joining the Dallas Police Department. By the age of 13, Theodora was a professional dancer and escort. A year later, she was married to a Syrian diplomat named Epiculus, who actually bet and lost her in a gambling game on their 5th anniversary. Refusing to go with the drunken gentleman, a pagan named Mercury, who had won her, she emasculated him with a wine bottle. And according to the legendary Greek historian and later her friend, Persilius, made unseemly haste to return to the capital, where she soon caught the emperor's eye.
The emperor was a brilliant man, suffering from severe mental illness. Today, he would probably be considered to be bipolar. Courtiers would report him not sleeping for days on end. In moments of frustration, what would be seen as mania today, he would rage for hours, breaking glasses and refusing to eat or sleep. His one source of soothing was the entertainment of the Hippodrome, the so called Eastern Colosseum, the largest theater of the Byzantine Empire. This 100,000 seat stadium had everything from mass in both Orthodox and Catholic rites to races, chariot races pulled by goats.
That sounds very entertaining. It was in the Eastern Empire's chief theater where Theodora first met the emperor. She performed in biblical themed plays, along with acting in an early version of burlesque, in which birds ate seeds off of what later court treasurer John of Cappadocia, a key imperial advisor, described as the young empress's awe-inspiring hips. Sounds like he had a bit of a crush on her. Justinian had come to prominence when his uncle, a brilliant but illiterate general named Justin, bought the imperial throne for himself when the former emperor died without children. Justinian was raised by his uncle. He rejected his birth name, Flavius, as a tribute to the old man's brilliance and uncanny instinct for political bargaining. Justinian was tasked with distributing the bribes on his uncle's behalf to important senators and military officers. The extreme stress of this year-long but ultimately successful task tormented his spirit, according to the great UK military historian Sir Basil Littlehart in his history book, Great Captains Unveiled. It's in this time frame where the symptoms of his bipolar disorder may have been manifest. He suffered a great deal by being initially forbidden by his aunt to marry Theodora, as she was, quote, below his station. His aunt having denied permission for the marriage and then dying, the young prince went into convulsions of tears at her funeral, kneeling before his aunt's grave. Justinian was so desperate, he reportedly begged his uncle to be allowed to either marry this woman or, quote, embrace the bliss of death.
Justinian's uncle Justin allowed the marriage out of a combination of pity, affection, and the desire, as he reportedly said, to hear of this vexing request no more. In 525, the couple had a dual wedding ceremony. Pope St. John I presided over a Catholic Mass, while the ecumenical patriarch St. Ephanos held a 4-hour Orthodox divine liturgy on the following day. To be clear, Justinian came into power facing many obstacles, one on top of the other. And on top of these problems, he apparently suffered from what today would be termed bipolar disorder. In his day, such things were not recognized as an illness, and having those problems put him in a bad light. Centuries before the treatment of mental illness was understood, everything was thought to have a religious connection. The dynamic, brilliant monarch vacillated between bold, forward-thinking actions and emotional outbursts. His courtiers probably would have attributed his troubles to demonic possession. Bipolar disorder is a mental health condition characterized by extreme mood swings, including emotional highs, sometimes called mania, and lows, hypomania or depression. Managing such a condition today involves a combination of medication, therapy, and support systems. In the 6th century, Understanding and treating mental health issues was vastly different and rudimentary. The Empress, as we will explore, had an amazing ability to calm Justinian in times of crisis. The great historian Berzelius details an episode in 530, 3 years after Justinian became ruler. At this time, the emperor had not slept or eaten for 3 days while hearing petitions from governors and peasants alike. Theodora was summoned by a terrified servant who had seen the emperor collapse. Theodora recognized the problem and told the servant that everything was fine and that His Majesty just needed a meal and some rest. She ordered the servant to bring another meal and assured him that Justinian would happily consume the food. When she began talking with Justinian, she told him he needed to eat and rest. And when he responded that his people needed him, she told him they needed him alive and in command, not starving, exhausted from lack of sleep, and not in control. The emperor apparently had many episodes alternating between great achievements and periods of isolation, panic, and stress. Theodora seemed to have an instinct that, in the parlance of our era, he needed to be kept busy and achieve some balance, including seeing to his physical needs. She felt continuous, bold activity would ensure a happy and manageable ruler so long as there was that balance.
She understood also that things needed to be done somewhat subtly. The emperor had to be led without fully being aware of it. His stubbornness came out if he felt like he was being pressured. A warm balm of reinforcement and softness was a far more effective approach to calming him or changing his mind. Theodora's resilience and strategic thinking were pivotal in managing the complexities of both religious and political crises throughout her time as empress. While her primary purpose was helping to keep Justinian stable and focused, she also played a large role in promoting needed reforms in many aspects of imperial society. Perhaps the most long-lasting reform had to do with the legal system. We are familiar today with the Justinian Code. She persuaded Justinian to alter the legal codes to permit women to inherit property after their marriage, run businesses, and be educated. To protect people from unfair circumstances, she made flesh trafficking and rape offenses punishable by death, and no quick death either, a particularly painful death involving being fed to lions. She also had a direct hand in shaping other policies. She championed women's rights, pushing for laws that expanded the protection for women in imperial service, including automatic emancipation for any female serf being made pregnant by a liege lord, voluntarily or not. Advocacy contributed to the establishment of a more progressive legal framework for women in the empire. In 530, as part of her support for reform, imperial schools financed by the government were jointly administered by priests and learned lay people were set up throughout the empire. But religious differences soon threatened to overshadow everything else. The so-called monophysite crisis was a detailed theological argument over whether Jesus Christ had both a human and divine nature. This seemingly minor issue threatened to destroy religious unity in the empire. After month-long debates, the so-called Chaldean Creed, confirming the dual nature of the Son of God, was approved, while permitting those of the monophysite belief, which is called the divine-only nature, freedom to worship at peace with no civil or political consequence. This was very progressive for the 6th century. The imperial couple disagreed on religious methods and beliefs. Justinian was passionately in favor of the dual nature of Jesus, while Theodora held to the divine only idea. It was unheard of for two powerful people to respectfully and openly disagree. Neither made an attempt to pressure the other. As the empress herself put it, according to noted historian Father Timothy Ware, in his magnificent work, The History of the Orthodox Church, God is too majestic to be fully reduced to earthly terms.
Historical accounts describe Justinian as a dynamic and driven leader known for his ambitious projects, like the construction of the Hagia Sophia and the codification of Roman laws in the Corpus Juris Civilis. These grand achievements were often followed by times of withdrawal and despondency. It is worth noting that people with bipolar disorder, while in the manic phase, behave and frequently seem to think in a psychotic manner. That is why a few years ago in the DSM-3, bipolar disorder was often said to be manic depressive psychosis. So while in the manic phase, as I say, sometimes they would exhibit psychotic-like behavior and mannerisms. I would think that Theodora probably worked diligently to hide these kinds of psychotic behaviors from the public. No easy task. These fluctuations in behavior would have been challenging for anyone close to him, in this case, especially Theodora.
Her resilience, and as I've said before, strategic thinking were pivotal in managing the complexities of Justinian's reign. Here are just a few ways she would have coped with and supported him throughout his disorder. Her unwavering support provided Justinian with emotional stability. Her presence and counsel during his depressive episodes would have been crucial, offering emotional reassurance and grounding him in moments of doubt and despair. The story is she'd even sing him to sleep like a child almost when he could not find any rest. During Justinian's manic phases, his grandiose ideas and relentless energy needed to be channeled effectively. Theodora's political savvy ensured that his ambitions were tempered with reason and practicality. Her influence helped to balance his visionary projects with the needs and resources of the empire. Perhaps the greatest example of this was Theodora's decisive actions during the Nika riots. That's a living testament to her ability to manage crisis effectively. Her calm and assertive leadership during Justinian's period of uncertainty demonstrated her capacity to take charge and maintain stability in her marriage and in the empire. As we've said, she championed numerous social reforms, particularly those benefiting women and marginalized groups. These initiatives provided an outlet for Justinian's energies, a constructive outlet, and improved the lives of many, aligning his grand visions with tangible improvements. The greatest crisis of the second half of the reign of the emperor and empress was the so-called Nika riots.
Well, just what the heck are the Nika riots? Well, they were, what would you say, Dr. Deneen?
It was an uprising caused by discontent over taxes, extreme inflation, and frustration with lack of access to the imperial court.
Aha. So the Nika riots almost cost Justinian his throne. Armenian General Nakas of Yerevan explained the source of this struggle. Like many other events in the history of the Eastern Empire, it began over a dispute in another arena. Food prices had increased to unheard of levels, and the hungry population is extremely dangerous. An armed mob of nearly 15,000 descended on the arena and the palace. The riots were caused by the public's anger and with the emperor and key officials. Justinian, along with his prominent officials, John the Cappadocian and Tribonian, faced significant public disapproval due to the implementation of high tax rates, allegations of corruption against the latter two officials, and John's reported harsh treatment of debtors. Justinian and John also reduced expenditure on the civil service and took steps to combat corruption within the civil service. And John was particularly unfavorable among the senatorial elites, who were hit hard by John's new taxation policy, which targeted the wealthiest in society, likely leading to senatorial influence within the riots. Numerous nobles who had suffered a loss of power and wealth due to the downsizing and reform of the civil service joined the ranks of the Greens. Justinian also took steps to diminish the influence of both teams. The Greens perceived this as an oppressive action akin to the reforms implemented in the civil service, while the Blues felt a sense of betrayal. The Roman legal code was widely perceived as a marker that distinguished the civilized Romans from barbarians. The law code was also religiously important, as the Romans were believed to be chosen by God, by themselves at least they believed that, becoming a symbol of justice, the code becoming a symbol of justice. As a result, the successful implementation of significant legal reforms by an emperor was viewed as lending legitimacy to their reign, while a lack of progress in this area was interpreted as a sign of divine displeasure.
These riots actually went on for more than a week. The emperor panicked, abandoning his litter and literally crawling to the arena. He made an attempt to pacify the crowd, firing John and his other chief tax collector, inviting the population to a banquet, and literally throwing loaves of bread to the people. This calmed some, but the remaining militants became emboldened, started shouting, "Victory!" which is what the word Nika means. "We will nurse from the emperor's breasts if we want to." The emperor had had enough, and he shouted, and this is a direct quote from the imperial archives: "Guards, ready my ship. We must flee in the name of God and the sacred Holy Mother. Get me out of here." According to Basil Hart, just as the emperor was about to leave, the crowd heard a deafening yell from Theodora as she shouted, "Stand fast!" The empress then sprinted to her husband's side, dressed in a purple tunic, showing off all of her feminine beauty and demanding to know what was the cause of all the uproar. Justinian expressed his panic that he was about to be murdered. As she had during other crises, Theodora took charge, declaring boldly that purple was an excellent color to be buried in. She faced the mob, making a Herculean effort to diffuse the tension. She reiterated the emperor's efforts to bring education and prosperity to the lives of the people, even to the terrible cost of his physical and mental health. She then denounced the violence of the mob as contrary to the law of both church and state, while agreeing to hear peaceful petitions for redress. This approach won over the leaders of both sides of the uprising, who signaled the mob to disperse in peace. I am quite certain the 2 bags of gold distributed during the empress's lecture helped to persuade the crowd to go home quietly. Now, we don't know entirely what happened. There are 2 very divergent stories from respected historians concerning the outcome of Theodora's manipulation of the mob. In the first account, Berzelius presents a positive outcome. The bribery persuaded the population to calm down, and the empress gave an audience to commoners, helping them to find work and food. On the other hand, Gorgias of Athens, a historian of approximately the same time frame, tells quite a different story. The leaders were indeed set free, and some were richly rewarded, while 10,000 common rioters were arrested and sentenced to serve as galley slaves for 7 years in the Navy. Another 20,000 were trampled to death trying to leave. It is not clear which account is more accurate. My opinion leads to the more positive approach, towards the more positive approach, because the emperor himself refers to the riots as cementing the love of my people for their sovereign in a letter to the patriarch of the Orthodox Church. In 528, Justinian began a 2-decade-long war with the Persian, now Iran, Sasanian Empire, which required his full attention to military affairs, leaving Theodora as regent in charge of the empire. Justinian's victories in North Africa allowed him to conquer the Vandal Empire and later on northern Italy, reestablishing the Roman Empire in the west. He had mixed results trying to overthrow the Visigoth monarch in northern Spain, leading to an alliance with Portuguese rebels in 538. During the same period, Theodora was reshaping domestic policy. She extended a welcome to Jews and Zoroastrians who had been expelled from other countries in Europe, employing many foreigners as architects, advisors, physicians, and even governors of occupied territories. To maintain the support of the poor, she declared tax holidays 3 times between 534 and 542. Only the noble classes with an income of 100 times more than the average person were still required to be taxed. That's not a bad idea for today. Beginning in 540, she took the unheard of step of giving married women voting rights for the imperial senate, which administered government schools, bureaucracy, and charities. See our podcast on Spartan women for another society that empowers its female citizens. By 557, Justinian had become ill with bubonic plague. Theodora took up more government power, ruling on his behalf until his death on New Year's Day, 565, at the age of 83. Theodora ruled in her own right for another 4 years until her demise in March 569. We do not have an exact date, of probable ovarian cancer. The Eastern Roman Empire remained a pillar of openness, with women and other marginalized groups allowed to live in safety and make use of their talents.
In summary, Theodora played a unique role for women. She repeatedly diffused armed uprisings, conflict with the people, as well as religious and political troubles. There's far more to this dynamic leader. Remember, she came from the lowest level of society as a dancer and prostitute. Her sexuality became a weapon to tease and win over the disaffected. It would have been easy for her just to revel in the power and luxurious living afforded by her role as empress. But she instead used her struggles to help others. She didn't turn her back on from whence she comes. When Justinian's emotional turmoil caused him to teeter on the edge of madness, she channeled her street smarts once again and her nurturing manner to guide him, and through him, the empire back to stability and peace. She understood loyalty was a two-way street and created programs to help the poor and a larger political role for women. Not having biological children, it may be that she kind of became mother to the nation. As with many people, she needed to be needed. Rejected by her first husband, gambled away no less. As we have already said, she emasculated her prospective husband only because he desired and didn't need her. She manipulated in the name of a better life for all, unifying the empire and healing her traumatized husband, Justinian. This is a hidden sage worthy of respect, even in our time.
I was very pleased to learn that the Orthodox Church has made both Justinian and Theodora saints, as well as giving them in the Catholic Church the status of Blessed Venerable, which is one step below saint. Worthy rewards. Thank you for listening to us, folks. Please give us a like, leave your comments, suggestions for future podcasts. We really enjoy doing this. There are many wonderful things coming up. We've been blessed to do some wonderful things in these past few months. And it's been a challenge, but a joy for me, and I think for Dr. Weaver as well. And I thank you all for allowing us this playground to challenge ourselves, to bring out things that are unknown to the general public. You're not going to find in a textbook.
Well, okay. So bye for now, I suppose, huh?
Yes, indeed. So long.